same link.
Hello everyone. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's the same link. I don't know quite what happened there. I clicked go live and it was showing go live in the stream, in the streaming side of YouTube, but in YouTube Studio, but apparently wasn't. So I was answering questions and yeah, very, very odd. And last time, I don't know if anyone was in the last stream, I started streaming and then immediately the stream went down and I got a message saying your stream has been flagged or your stream's been flagged for inappropriate content or something like that. So that was very, very strange. Hello, everyone. Yes, hello again. Okay, I will rewind to the chat here because there was a question. What was because it was how did you get into reenacting? I think. Oh yeah, Homie Squad 101. How old am I? 30. I'm now in my fourth decade, just turned 30. So yes.
And then number 2 was Rick E with hi. What got you into reenacting?
Yes. The reenact. How did I get into reenacting from Rick E? I started as a collector primarily. A friend of mine, David Bell Hartley, who you'll have seen turn up in previous videos, was a collector, and I sort of got into collecting via his influence. Then started reenacting. Started out with Royal Navy primarily, and then branched out from there, from collecting the uniform, the kit, etc. And then sort of got into the reenactor bit briefly of buying stuff specifically to reenact, and then kind of went back round to collecting stuff and then wearing and displaying the kit I had, and trying to build up full sets of equipment and small kits and so forth for different periods. And that's why the reason it's called the Cold War stuff and the jungle warfare stuff and everything else came from. But it started with collecting primarily. What is the next question, please?
Matthew White, are we going to see the R&D kit
anytime soon? Yes. Quick sip of tea. Yes, Matthew White asks, are we going to see the R&D kit anytime soon? So definitely at some point. The Royal Naval Division, of course, from the mid-war period onwards, begins to look essentially indistinguishable from the army other than their insignia. So they become a little bit less interesting in that regard in terms of kit. I mean, obviously they're a very interesting unit. The Royal Naval Division is a very interesting unit in and of itself. But I will certainly consider doing some more video. Well, some videos. I haven't done any videos on that yet. It's only been photographs posted, but some videos on that going forward, definitely. I will look into doing that. Next question, please.
Zach Pack.
Yes.
Asked, so what were the contents in the HD issue ammo patches?
So looking back, I think this was quite well answered in the chat. The Home Guard ammunition pouches, of course, you don't just have the sort of what everyone calls the BAR pouches. You have Sten pouches as well, and if you were armed with a Sten, you'd carry a Sten pouch and a Home Guard pouch. The Home Guard pouches, of course, could carry ammunition for the rifle, but they could also carry ammunition for the BAR. So the ammunition carried would depend on the unit, what weapons you had, and both of them could be used to carry rifle ammunition if the platoon primarily had rifles and nothing else, or obviously if you had a BAR, you might carry BAR ammunition in there and so forth. So it depends on what the unit had in terms of weaponry as to what was carried. As different troops in the British Army would carry ammunition differently, very similarly. Particular troops didn't have a Bren gun and so forth, cartridge carriers issued and so forth. So it depends on what exactly the unit had in terms of weaponry. But yes, that's an answer to that, I think. Next one, please.
Will the World War II collector ask, are Soldier of Fortune battle dress surge reproductions any good?
Okay, so will the World War II collector asked, are Soldier of Fortune battle dress reproductions any good? Unfortunately, unless something has changed since the last time I saw them, which a few months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. I've seen them for sale at a Victory show at the end of last year. The cut is not right. They're too long in the body, at least the last ones I saw, and the material is not very good. And the problem, of course, is to make proper serge. It is a complicated fabric to make because of the the number of different colours of wool used in it and so forth. But the stuff Soldier of Fortune uses is not up to snuff at all. It's just not anywhere close. So I certainly wouldn't recommend Soldier of Fortune's battle dress, much as I have recommended some of their other products. And I don't have anything against the company as a whole per se. Their battle dress, obviously I'm more than willing to recommend other of their products. The battle dress itself, I can't really recommend for use. It's not up to snuff in terms of a decent repro for use, in my opinion, based on comparing it to originals and so on. So yes, next question, please.
The next one is Darren Batterson. Do you read the books by Jean Boucherie on Canadian and British soldier D-Day to VE Day?
Who was that from? Sorry.
Darren Batterson, I think.
Darren Batterson. Unfortunately, no. The books that you mentioned. Sorry.
Repeat the question, babe.
Yeah, you need to. Could you repeat it to me?
Yeah. Do you read the books by, is it Jean Boucherie?
Jean Boucherie. No, I haven't read Jean Boucherie's books. Unfortunately, no. I will have a look though. If you can recommend them, I'll take a look. But no, I haven't read those. Unfortunately. I just take a while answering each question. That's very true. Apologies.
I just didn't want him to get upset.
No. We don't want to.
He's only one question away anyway. Sander asks, what is the oldest item in your collection? Which I think
I did answer in the previous one, but I will answer again.
What is
the oldest item I think in my collection is an original 1888 pattern Slade Wallace belt. Now I don't know when it was made, but the markings and so forth on it should suggest it is a Victorian manufactured one. I don't know when the Slade Wallace, when the manufacturer changed from the belt suitable for use with the full equipment to one just used as essentially a walking out or a walking out belt. I don't know whether production continued because of course the Guards continued using 1888 right through into the 1930s. So I don't know. It certainly looks like an original old Victorian era. I forget the markings on it now, but anyway. So I would imagine that is the oldest bit of kit in my collection is an original 1888 Slade Wallace belt. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, next question, please.
Will Robinson, what would you recommend I buy first for a collection?
Will Robinson, what would I recommend you buy first for a collection? Well, that's quite a nebulous question. It would depend entirely on what you're intending to collect, what area. I mean, I started out with Second War kit, and I'm glad I did because since I started, prices have gone up. I then moved into more of the post-war kit, which I'm trying to get whilst it's still relatively easily available and not too expensive. Because obviously things, as more and more people start to collect them, and you're seeing more and more people reenacting post-war, the Cold War now, kit is going to get more expensive. So I think that's your call, depending on what you're wanting to collect, unless you want to specify a slightly want to specify a bit further in that regard regarding the time period you're most interested in and so forth. But it's really down to you as to what time period you're looking at collecting primarily. So yeah.
Okay. And the next question is from Milo. How cheap can you get 58 pattern webbing?
So a question from Milo on 58 pattern webbing. How cheaply can you pick it up? Not great. Yeah. How many bins you prefer? How many pound piles are you prepared to dive in? The problem, of course, at the moment is that shows aren't on, so it's a little bit difficult to advise that. But I've picked up the majority of my 1958 pattern has been picked up in pound piles at shows. That includes the early kit as well. I don't think I've paid more than a couple of pounds for my early pouches. If you wanted to, you could scour eBay and buy them for a lot more. But I've gone to military vehicle shows, reenactment events, and so forth. And whenever I see a trader with a big pile of 58 pattern, because you can still buy it very much as its surplus even now, I wouldn't pay more than for a set. I wouldn't pay more than for a good cleanish set. I wouldn't pay more than about £15 at absolute most for a good clean set of 58, because you can put it together for less than that, buying the components individually from piles at shows. It's getting a little bit more expensive now, but yeah, that's what I'd be looking to pay at most. I'm not looking to buy any more at the moment because I have crates of the stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Tamachi, do you have any experience with shooting or fieldcraft?
I do have some experience with shooting and fieldcraft.
As I have done both, I feel a lot of
Yeah.
reenactors
Oh,
get
sorry.
a skewed view of the gear they use because they only have to wear it for a few hours.
And who was that from again? Sorry.
Tamachi.
Tamachi, yes, I think so. Tamachi asks, have I conducted any fieldcraft shooting because he feels that reenactors get a skewed perspective from just wearing the kit. I think there's certainly a lot of that. That people who perhaps just drape themselves over jeeps and that's it. Wearing the kit, and then they take it off as soon as they possibly can. I can understand that to a degree. I mean, obviously, with original kit, we don't tend to wear it in particularly arduous conditions, particularly when the items are quite rare and perhaps fragile. But as you'll have seen, obviously, I like doing the marches and so forth to get a feel for wearing the kit in a longer period. In terms of fieldcraft and so forth, I do have some experience of both fieldcraft and shooting. From being a cadet, and I've done a little bit of shooting since then. But not very recently. I did go to Bisley, which was excellent for a shooting day. Got to fire a trials. Now I forget the designation, but trials number 4, which is actually the rifle number 1 Mark something or other, Mark 6, I think. Beautiful thing, like a number 4, but with a magazine cut off, checkered grips. Absolutely fantastic. And I do apologise because I should know the designation off the top of my head, but I don't. So that's definitely got some experience of that, and I think it does help if you actually go and do field cooking and so forth, and field craft in terms of understanding camouflage, understanding earthwork, how you should actually build defensive positions and so forth. Getting at least a working knowledge of that is helpful. And as you say, I think there is a big difference between those who have perhaps the knowledge of that, even if it's not something they do concurrently, something they've done before, or at least have a working knowledge of, compared to those who don't and just perhaps dress up a bit more. It depends. I think it does affect your reenacting to a degree, and it would be it would be good for more people to get some idea of fieldcraft and so forth, to improve their reenacting, I guess. That would be my opinion on the matter. Anyway, next question, please.
Will did clarify his earlier.
Oh, Will. So Will's clarifies.
Like collect Falklands.
So Will's looking to collect Falklands gear.
What would you recommend he
buys first? Well, I would look at getting yourself a decent set of 1958 pattern, try and find some nice clean components of it, and put a set together. That's obviously the core of the infantry kit at the time. Obviously, it was tailored by individual units, particularly the paras had different ways of putting it together and so forth. But once you've got a good set of it together, that's a good building block to move on from there. And it depends then if you're looking to collect stuff from all the forces involved. There are things readily available on eBay, like 1968 pattern combat uniform, 1958 pattern. Obviously, because shows aren't around at the moment, you can pick those up on eBay, and they're relatively easy to find and pick up. And if you see them at a good price, and they are the kind of things you're more likely to see at a good price, pick them up because they make the core of the basic kit that was on issue at the time. So that would be my advice, and then start looking for some of the more unusual bits and pieces like the Arctic windproofs and things like this. That would be my advice. Next question, please.
Paul Sherlock.
Paul Sherlock.
What is the most useful piece of kit you use at events?
What is the most useful bit of kit you use at events? Yeah, tin mug. Yeah, that's not a bad answer actually. Yeah, but go a little bit further than that. The most used item, I think, and they cover such a massive period of time, such a long period of time, would be the ammo boots. Probably they're the thing I probably wear the most because they're worn. I wear them even for 60s in some instances. So they're right the way through from the 1930s right the way through to 1960s, sort of almost a 30-year lifespan. And they're probably the bit of kit that gets used the most. So if you want to take that as being the most useful, A good solid pair of ammo boots. They'll cover most of that time period. So I think, obviously, I suppose for the 50s you need a set that's highly bulled, and for other periods you don't. Depending on what you're doing, of course, in the field you still have dub-in boots in the 50s. But yeah, they're probably the most useful bit of kit I've got, actually, and I try and look after them because of that. Having a decent pair of ammo boots is they're actually sat near me here. They've been dub-ined again recently, and keeping them in good nick is an important part of the hobby. Yeah. Next question, please.
Oliver Burnhill asks, what RAF kit do you have?
This is a good question.
What
was the name again? Sorry.
Oliver Burnhill.
Oliver Burnhill asks, what the reason Lucy's doing this, by the way, is because the chat disappears long before I get to the questions, so it just smooths things. Oliver Burnhill, what RAF kit do I have? That is an excellent question. Until recently, I had some post-war flying kit. The only thing I have from that now is Mark II bone dome and mask. The RAF kit I have is very limited, really. I have both wartime. It's basically ground crew, basic uniform. So for the wartime, I have both a couple of suits of wartime, some wartime, some post-war service dress, OA service dress, which is obviously very useful because it does span through into the 50s, and some of it is 50s made, but it's the same as was worn during the war, essentially. And then I have a suit of suits aircrew, which is returned war service dress. But anyway, suits aircrew, so a blouse and trousers, basically the RAF's version of battle dress, essentially. I have a blouse and trousers, wartime blouse and trousers from that suit. I have some post-war war service dress. Hello, Rosie. You probably hear the squeaking in the background from the cat. I have some post-war war service dress, which is I have the later pattern of that. There was an interim, which is very similar to the 1947 pattern of the army with the big wide lapels. The patterns I have are essentially blue 1949 pattern with the notch lapel. So I have a couple of blouses and a couple of pairs of trousers of that set, berets and FS caps to go with the respective uniforms. And I do also have a green denim overall, which was worn by ground crew in the 50s and 60s. I say that war service dress takes you right the way through into the 1960s. The RAF stuck with that uniform for quite a long time through surge, so it covers right the way through to that time period. But you'll have seen, if you look in the video of the I did covering the Shackleton at Coventry Airport, one of them I run through the ground crew kit, including green overall, the green denim overall. So most of what I've got basically is ground crew kit. It's basic uniform. I don't have any of the flying kit or anything really myself. It's an expensive game to get into, and I A, can't really afford it at present, and B, it's not my particular area of interest. The ground pounding is quite satisfactory to me. So yes.
And C, we need a bigger house.
And to also need a bigger house first. Yeah, I was going to say before I get into any of that stuff. But it's very expensive, so I'm not sure I ever will. But we'll see. We'll see. Next question, please.
From John Panero.
From John Panero.
First question of many. Do you have an example of P-37 Canadian battle dress? If not, do you plan on getting an example?
Do I have an example of Canadian 1937 pattern battle dress? Now I'm going to pull you up there. There is no such thing as 1937 pattern battle dress. There is a video on my channel covering this. But the Canadian wartime battle dress, yes, I would like to get a suit of it. I would, as I say, at some point in the future, yes, I would like to get a suit of Canadian battle dress, even if it's an example badged up British, which you do sometimes see. Obviously, it was popular because of the slightly better quality cloth as a walking out dress. I would like to get a suit of the Canadian battle dress, definitely. I'd like to expand the Commonwealth collection of Commonwealth battle dress. I have some Indian battle dress. I have. Do I still have a wartime Australian? Not sure. But anyway, I'd like to expand the Commonwealth side of battle dress, the Dominion Forces battle dress, to show different variations of it. I'd also like to get some War Aid as well at some point, but these are all things for the future. But yes, no, I'm interested in picking some up, definitely so. Next question, please.
Do you reenact Airborne, and how often?
Yes. So who was that from? Sorry.
Sorry, Daniel Lindboom.
Daniel. Oh yeah, Lindeboom. Daniel Lindeboom. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yes. How do I reenact airborne, and how often? I do. Yes. If you look on Instagram, and there's some video on here from Duxford as well. We actually did an event for the anniversary of Operation Overlord, the airborne component of Operation Overlord. Dax over Duxford, which was, of course, the UK side of Dax over Normandy, with the Dakotas flying over and dropping paratroopers. I reenact airborne as and when it's needed. I reenacted there. Obviously, we were doing an event for the Airborne Forces Museum at Duxford. I have the basic kit. I don't have any of the harness or anything like that, or the oversmock, but I have smock and helmet. So it's a basic. I have the basic setup for that. I've done Hat Green. I also did an airborne post-war airborne setup there with a post-war smock and the 1958 pattern and everything, because it was the anniversary of Arnhem, but we were at a post-war event, so I did 1964, 20 years on. So yeah, I do it on occasion. I'll recreate airborne troops, but it's not a focus of mine. But it is of course very interesting. So when the opportunity arises, I tend to take it and do that. We're planning an event this year at Tatton Park for the obviously for basically because that was a major training area for British airborne troops, dropping, doing jumps and then marching back to Ringway in Manchester. But unfortunately, that's obviously not going to happen now, it looks like, because of the current situation. But yes, sorry, a bit of a rambling answer. I'm getting into those now. I thought I'd kept it fairly concise up to this point, but beginning to ramble now. But yes, so reenacting airborne forces I do, and I tend to do it whenever it's required. So yes, next question, please.
From John Shanahan, would you ever think of doing a one-man's kit or mannequin of the month on the British Aiden?
Okay, so John Shanahan.
Yeah.
I have done a one-man's kit on the British forces in Aden. If you look back through my channel, there is a one-man's kit of a private in the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders in Aden in 1967. So it's there. I will probably do more on Aden at some point in the future, but that's for the present tick box. That's done and is available on the channel should you wish to go and have a look at that. It shows a basic kit of a private in a crater in 1967. So, yes.
Rick E wants to know, what is your favourite reenactment impression?
Rick E wants to know what my favourite reenacting impression is. I don't really like the term impression.
Your language.
It possibly, well, no, it is a common term. The kit impression tends to be used by people who I'm buying the kit to do this impression, whereas it's more from a collecting point of view. And I'm not trying to be high and mighty here, and by any means at all. It's just that I tend to wear original kit as much as possible, so it's like collecting, and then suddenly I can put this together. My favourite, if it's set of equipment and kit, I said last time my favourite period and sort of theatre of operations in the previous stream to reenact is jungle warfare in the 50s and 60s. That's partly due to the ancillary kit and how good the displays can look if you get a wooded area and so forth. In terms of wearing the kit and so forth, I think 1960s jungle warfare would be my preference, British that is, because you get such a mishmash of kit. You can wear the early 1958 pattern components with some 1944 and so forth. You can mix and match stuff together, which is similar to my answer previously on this. I think that's fair to say. And obviously you have the British use of the AR-15 platform, the Colt models 602, 601 and 602 in the jungle, essentially M16s. So that's quite interesting as well, coming in alongside the SLR. So you've got an interesting mix of weaponry at the time as well. So that's a very interesting period to recreate, and probably one of my favourite sets of kit to put together. It looks good as well. There is an element of that, but the kit is interesting historically to see. It's a bit of a crossroads for British development of British kit, and as I say, bringing in weapons like the M16 and so forth is interesting as well. Sort of a modern, very modern weaponry showing up, but obviously a lot of the kit is still quite dated. So I like it from that point of view. It's an interesting mix of bits and pieces. Next question, please.
From Will, the World War II collector.
Yes.
What's your most prized item in your collection?
Ooh, Will, the World War II collector, my most prized item. I think now, difficult one. I have a lot of very nice items which I am very glad and lucky to have. It's a bit of I'm a bit torn. There's one thing which I absolutely love, and it was a lucky, well, not a lucky, it was an educated punt, and that is a 1918 dated 1917 pattern officer's service dress. So it's a World War One shoulder rank jacket, which was bought for very little, along with the chap's post-war service dress, so not 20s or 30s service dress, and his blues. That little set, the fact it's together, is very, very nice, but particularly the 1918 dated officer service dress is a lovely thing, particularly as it's an off-the-peg manufactured example, so it tells that story of the late First World War, not necessarily having things tailor-made anymore. They're actually being made in bulk to be, bought off the peg or even issued out in some instances. And I think that the other thing it would be a balance with would be something that was recently gifted to me by my good friend Alan, who's shown up in previous videos. And you'll have seen this in the recent birthday unboxing video if you've seen that. And it's the sateen battle dress blouse, which is a really unusual piece of uniform and something we don't actually have an answer to exactly what it is or what it's for. So it's a battle dress blouse, 1949 pattern, but made in the sateen material of the combat uniform that was around in the 50s. And it's really odd. It's presumably a trials item or something like that, or it's labeled to an NCO, a specific NCO. So possibly made for them for use whilst instructing men who are wearing combat dress. Not entirely clear on that. It's a topic for a future video that'll be coming up soon, so you'll get to see that in more detail. It's a toss-up probably between those two, I think. The sateen battle dress, for its unusual, the fact it's very unusual. There was one other one available when Alan bought it quite a few years ago, and the other one because it was a very lucky pickup, and it's historically very interesting. And it's it's one of the earliest bits of uniform I have in the collection. So between those two, I think would be the balance. I can't pick between them.
I'll just interject between questions a couple of comments that have just popped up. One is Jake saying, Simon, I can't remember if I said on the note, he believes the binos were from around the Great War.
Around the Great War, yes. Jake, I'm going to talk about that in a minute once we've got a few more questions. So yeah.
And the other one is someone called Misconstrued Adventures. More bum, you're a bad influence. So I assume his collection has increased vastly in size.
Very possibly, yes. I may be a bad influence on people there. More, but what's it? Sorry, more. I'm a bad influence.
No, he says more bum.
You're a bad influence. Yes. Well, I probably am. To get to the stuff, Jake, because I was going to talk about this after a few more questions, but as Jake sort of pointed out, I think we will talk about this now. Jake Brown, who's in the chat, who has his own YouTube channel, which you can go on, Jake Brown Collection, you should go and have a look at. Jake's very kindly sent me a little lot of stuff for my birthday, which is very kind of him. So for a set of binoculars here, as you can see, which we'll probably talk about this stuff a little bit more detail in the future. We have here an interesting little pamphlet, Comrades in Arms, which is a training pamphlet for junior officers and officer cadets to assist them in getting a handle on their men in the field from 1942. A copy of the Evening Standard from June 6th, 1944, which is obviously a somewhat significant date. And if we look here, an Australian slouch hat, a wonderfully beaten up Australian slouch hat, which is just excellent. So yes, very, pleased with all of that, Jake. Thank you very much again. There's also a patch here, a US patch, which I don't know the details of, I'm afraid to say. My US kit, I believe it's US anyway. Jake, perhaps you could answer that. I'm not entirely sure on that. But yes, so a lovely little selection of bits and pieces there. Thank you very much indeed for that. Really is greatly appreciated. And thank you very much for the birthday wishes as well. Obviously, as you say, the post is a bit slow at the moment, understandably. But thank you very much indeed. But yeah, go and have a look at Jake's channel. As I say, Jake Brown collection, there he is in the chat. So yes, thank you very much once again. It's really appreciated as ever. But yes, so back to questions. What is the next question, please?
101. Where do you buy your World War II stuff?
What was the name again? Sorry.
Homie Squad.
Oh, Homie Squad 101 again. Yes. Where do I buy my World War II stuff? So that is a complicated question because I buy it all over the place. A lot of the original stuff came from shows, webbing and so forth came from shows. Again, going through piles of stuff. The battle dress I use for reenacting primarily came from Panther Store, which is now defunct, but I understand there are plans to get that running again, which would be great because it's very good reproduction. My original battle dress came from various sources. Some of my stuff came from eBay. A lot of it came from shows. It really depends on exactly what it is. Most of the original stuff I think came probably from shows. Quite a few bits and pieces from eBay, and yeah, just all over the place really. There's no one specific place I bought bits and pieces from. So yeah. Next question, please.
Darren Batterson again.
Yes, Darren Batterson again.
Did the 3rd County of London Yeomanry Sharpshooter
have
infantry units in Northwest Europe late World War II?
Did the 3rd County of London Yeomanry Sharpshooters have infantry units in Northwest Europe late World War II? Now, I don't know off the top of my head. I would suggest going and looking at a website detailing them. I think there is a Wikipedia page on them, and that should give you an answer. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I can't help with something like that straight off the top of my head on a specific unit. That's not something I can answer. Just off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
Improve your knowledge, boy.
Well, it's more my knowledge is more based on kit as opposed to specific unit histories. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. Next one, please.
Sander asks, do you have any plans to do more Dutch impressions?
So Sander, do I have any plans to do any more Dutch impressions? Well, I don't plan to really do a Dutch impression per se. I don't really plan on wearing the kit. The main reason, well, thank you very much to Kevin Mills for his assistance in putting stuff together and gifting me things. He knew I was very interested in putting together a set of late Dutch kit in order to show a comparison with, well, to give an example of how British kit ended up influencing continental European kit going forward, and how it remained in service for a very long time in various guises. And obviously Dutch kit is a very good example of that because it was being made into the 80s and it was being issued into the 90s. So it's very late use of updated, if you want to call it that, 1937 pattern webbing. And for that point of view, it's interesting historically to show where the influence of the immediate post-war years, when a lot of this stuff was surplus, the influence that exerted on design in other countries. And that's the reason I wanted to put it together. So I'm not sure it's something I'm necessarily going to reenact at an event, but it's something I wanted to put together for historical interest's sake and obviously for the channel as well. And Kevin was very helpful in putting together the kit and helping me get that together. So yes, not something I really plan on expanding massively going forward, but there we are. That's an answer. Probably not what you wanted to hear. I imagine you probably wanted me to be doing more on that, but it's probably not going to be a focus going forward, I'm afraid to say. Next question, please.
Milo asks, what is the best and worst parts of reenacting?
Milo asks, what is the best and worst parts of reenacting? So the best parts are the camaraderie with if you've got a good group and you get on well. Obviously, it's a bit of, from the point of view of your own enjoyment, it's a camping trip often, and that can be very enjoyable. Talking about anything, be it military kit or whatever, at shows is very enjoyable. Picking up kit, good value stuff at shows is always very good as well. Whilst you're there, talking to the public is high up on the list as well. If you get interested members of the public, that can be very enjoyable talking to them, and particularly perhaps dispelling myths or talking to them about something that they have a base knowledge on, but they've not really got an in-depth knowledge, but they're interested to develop their knowledge. That's always good. The worst parts of reenacting generally are when the weather turns bad. It can be very depressing when you've put a lot of effort to try and do a good display, and then obviously no one turns up, or it's based on you being outside, and obviously much as troops had to rough it in the rain and the wet and everything, that's fair enough, and you take that. It's the fact that public are unlikely to turn up in great numbers if it's like that. And also a lot of old kit and stuff, you don't want it getting wet, ideally, if you're doing a display. Obviously, we're often displaying things in a way that they wouldn't, that wouldn't be considered by soldiers at the time. So old paperwork, anything like that, getting wet and stuff you don't want. So bad weather can be a bad part of reenacting. And sometimes I think that talking to people who have the wrong impression and won't be told, and that sounds bad perhaps from, but who have a misconception and won't let it go. That's one thing I would say in the collecting world and the reenacting world itself. And just to caveat that, to show I'm not trying to get at anyone there. You have to be open-minded to new information, because we have some understanding of collecting and kit and so forth is based on third-hand information or speculation what some bits and pieces were used for example, or when certain items were introduced. And a new piece of research might come out, particularly from primary sources, that shows that actually, oh no, this was for this purpose and it was introduced at this date, as opposed. So you have to be open-minded about your understanding of kit, and that may change. And unfortunately, talking to some people at events, the general public, about historical events and so forth, they have a very solid opinion on something, and you'll try and caveat it a bit more and paint the picture around the subject and say it's often about bigger picture stuff, like, oh, this battle was such a waste of life, or this particular general, or this soldier, or this story about this soldier was cobblers, or whatever. And you'll say, well, no, actually this is what happened, or something, and they won't take it. That can be very frustrating at times when you have the knowledge and obviously perhaps the wider knowledge on your side, and that there were elements to the story that they don't know, but they're stuck on their perception. That can be quite frustrating at times, but that's fine. They're entitled to their opinion. You can't get you worked up too much, but it's just somewhat frustrating sometimes when that happens. But yes, that's some of the rough and the smooth of reenacting, I guess. Next question, please.
The next question would be, and there's been a couple of questions that are very similar, so I'll put them together. That is
tea and water, need both.
James Bevan, as it says, seeing how Panther stores stopped producing British battle dress.
Yes.
Not sure about German stuff. Who do you suggest to go through as the next best option? And then likewise, History K has asked, what is the best battle dress?
James. Is that James Bevan and
History K said, what is the best battle dress reproduction?
Asking about the best battle dress reproduction, because, well, partly because Panther Store has gone out of production. There is a hope that Panther Store's production techniques and the woolen mill and so forth will go back into production at some point under new ownership. Very much hope that happens, because they were the market leaders. Next best option would probably be Khaki on Campaign, which is Dickie Knight. His serge cloth is very, very good, and his cut's good as well. Obviously, that's tailor-made. It's quite expensive. In terms of an off-the-shelf or a mass manufacturer, a large-scale manufacturer, I don't know of anyone who's producing really decent battle dress. It's a hole in the market. As I said earlier, the problem is that making serge cloth in anything like it, the cut can be good with some reproductions, but the cloth isn't. It's something I am looking into. I may be purchasing a set of battle dress in the future to look at, repro battle dress to consider, based on some recommendations and so forth. But until I've been able to have a look at that in detail, I don't want to recommend anything to anyone, because I don't want to mislead, and I don't want to tell you to go and spend your hard-earned money on something which actually turns out to not be as good as it might be. So I can't really advise on that question at present, but hopefully Panther Store, type that obviously under a new name, will be going into reproduction again at some point, and that would be the ideal situation, because the serge they produced, particularly early on, the serge they produced was very, very good, and the cut was very, very good. They were made to original sizes, so you could order original sizes, and they were just excellent in terms of reproduction. The quality was good, and I had a very early set of battle dress serge, and we noticed that the dressing pockets and the tabs on the ankles weren't as they should be. We provided some feedback, and another person in our group ordered a set from them, and turned out they fixed the problem. So they were open to feedback as well, which was excellent. So hopefully that's all on board, and someone else will be taking them on at some point in the future, but we will see. But yes, that's unfortunately I can't really advise on anyone else at present. I don't have knowledge of other repros in order to, other than knowing that Soldier of Fortune and What Price Glory are not spot on in terms of cut. They're visually wrong just looking at them. I can't really advise on anyone else who is good, so not for the present anyway. Next question, please.
There's been a couple of comments on that. Someone saying K Canvas battle dress.
K Canvas is Soldier of Fortune. They are one and the same.
A couple of people saying Soldier of Fortune seems fine, and another one saying Epic Militaria is the cut.
I've not seen Soldier of Fortune. I've not seen Soldier of Fortune battle dress since. Come on, Simon. It's an event name, and I can't bring it to mind, and I have no idea. Victory Show. There we go. Since Victory Show last year, when I saw battle dress on their stand. If you're happy with it, you're happy with it. The stuff I saw on the stand at the time, the cut was wrong and the cloth was wrong. So there it is. And this is compared to a knowledge of original battle dress in terms of the length of the body. The difference between the pockets, the base of the pockets, and the waistband is too long, so it's not not high waisted enough basically. And the cloth is not close to serge, or the stuff they were selling at the time wasn't. I know their batches vary from time to time because they're produced in Pakistan, I believe, primarily, and the actual different batches of stuff they get made can vary. So it's possible you got a good one. I don't know that's closer in terms of cut and so forth. But the stuff I saw at Victory Show last year, based on that, I can't give. That's the last time I've seen it in the flesh, as it were. I can't give a recommendation based on that because it wasn't up to snuff at all. So yeah, that's just how it is. Next question, please.
The Soviet Bear asks, do you know where I can find South African pattern 70 webbing cheaply?
Now that's a good question. The Soviet Bear asking about South African pattern 70 webbing, where you can pick it up cheaply. That's a good question. I don't believe you can anymore. You could for a long time, but it appears to have dried up the stocks of it that were available. I'm assuming South Africa sold off a large amount of it at one time. Various militaria dealers seem to have had it in a large amount, and it's now somewhat, well, not scarce, it's still around, but it's more expensive than it was. So it depends how cheaply you're talking, but it's certainly not 1958 pattern prices, which is unfortunate because it's an interesting set of web equipment, and it's something I might buy in the future. Because obviously it is derived from 1958 pattern. Well, it's derived from South Africa's essentially own version of 1958 pattern, the 1961 pattern, I think it was. But no, it's not available as very cheaply anymore. It's certainly not available for 1958 pattern prices as it was at one time, which is a shame. But these things, they were only made in certain amounts, and once stocks sort of dry up and people have bought them up, then the price is inevitably going to go up. So. Yes, it's available online still. You can still buy bits and pieces of it online. But
Jake Brown has just put in 394th Bomb Group, 587th Bombardment Squadron. I assume that's your patch.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Jake. That's brilliant. That's excellent. Yeah, I was going to look it up online before starting the stream, and I completely forgot. What I like is it still has leather on the back from where it's been on a jacket. So yes, that's great. Thank you very much, Jake. That's excellent. I will. I say don't have a massive collection of US bits and pieces, but their insignia was always very interesting. So thank you very much for that. That's great. Next question, please.
What are your best and worst field cooking experiences at gigs? From David Brennan.
So David Brennan asks, what are the best and worst field cooking experiences from gigs? So the worst field cooking experience was from War and Peace, and I'm sorry, Matt. This is the event where we did Royal Army. Well, the main group was doing Royal Army Medical Corps. I was there with a light railway display, First World War light railway display from the Most Railway Trust. They'd taken a simplex tractor and a wagon down and laid some track, and I was involved with that. Unfortunately, there was an attempt to make a field oven and so forth using an ammo tin to do a roast dinner in the field, which just didn't work. And we put quite a bit of money in for food, and I think that just stuff got wasted, and not the right stuff was bought, and it was a new experience for all of us. But the field kitchen idea, the field oven, didn't work. I think building it started at the wrong time of day. Unfortunately, I was away from the display most of the time, along with the light railway display. So I sort of arrived back to find that the oven hadn't been constructed. It just was a bit of a disaster. It was fine. We didn't go hungry, but it just didn't work as planned. In terms of good experiences, there's been quite a few really. Cooking breakfast over an open fire in a trench was good fun. We did that at is that Bunker Bash? Can't remember now off the top of my head. But yeah, cooking over open fires is always good fun and tends to go well. Making tea at open fire at Victory Show is always good. Just keep the water on the go, keep it topped up, and you've got to brew whenever you want. Yeah, and we tend to eat very well at events. We often take stoves as opposed to if we're doing sort of more of a mobile museum display as opposed to living history. We'll take more modern camping gear to cook with. But yeah, no, most of the time it goes very well. So generally speaking, it's a good experience. There's been only a very few where it's not gone as planned. But yes, next question, please.
What Rick E asks, what was the best and worst reenactment event you ever attended?
Rick E has asked, what's the worst and best reenactment events I've ever attended? So one of the best was Coam, which is one of the very early ones I did, where we recreated the BEF, the BEF, the British Army post Dunkirk, actually. So not the BEF, 1940 in training. Preparing to meet the invasion, and it gave a lot of scope for different training activities, which were great. The public were engaged. It just all went very well. There was a big group of us. We had period tentage, period. That was another good cooking event. We had centralised cooking going on. It all went very well and was very enjoyable. In terms of bad events, don't really think we've had any particularly bad events. I can't think of any that really stick in my mind as being unenjoyable. There's been a few which have been interesting that have had issues surrounding them, but it's always come right in the end. So I don't really, I can't really pick out a worst event for any particular reason that's made it particularly unenjoyable or bad. Really, that's a difficult one to put on. It helps when you've got a good group of people around you. So even if things do go awry, you generally pull together and you make it work. So I don't think I've ever really had an absolutely awful event that I could say is categorically the worst one I've been to. There've been a few that have been not as good as others, but I don't think I could pick any one particular one out that's been disastrous and therefore worthy of that title. So yeah, I don't think I can give a solid answer on that one, I'm afraid. But yeah, next question, please. I'll think about that and maybe come back to it later. But
Rosie the Tea Cozy, which is the best name.
The best name, Rosie the Tea Cozy.
Are there many shows in the UK where they can reenact Northern Ireland? They fear it might be too soon, but they have an 80s Land Rover lightweight that served in Operation Banner.
Okay.
Would love to display.
So Rosie the Tea Cozy asks if there are events where you can recreate Northern Ireland. Has a Land Rover that was used in Operation Banner. There are events where Northern Ireland is where troops operating in Northern Ireland are recreated. Most post-war events, military vehicle events, and things. I've seen people recreating or displaying kit from Operation Banner. The stop headlights off boards and things that were used at checkpoints show up quite regularly, and so forth. So I wouldn't dissuade you from doing it, provided it's done obviously with the idea of showing the kit off primarily. Unless you're doing something that's provocative to either side, I wouldn't imagine there'd be any problem. most people are just interested to see the kit that was used at the time and how the army adapted for public order duties and so forth. I've not come across anyone who's been particularly taken a particular political stance on it, which is, that's fair enough, really. I mean, I've done videos looking at various different periods of Operation Banner and the kit used, and primarily my interest is the kit that was used. And I don't think there should be any problem with talking about that. I don't think there should any problem talking about the history at all, and recreating the soldiers of the time shouldn't be seen as anything more than that. I don't think. I wouldn't have had. They were doing a very difficult job over there, and obviously the history of it is contentious, but I don't think it's too soon if it's being done for the right reasons and in the right way.
Or it might not be vintage enough.
Well, I don't think that's the case at all. I think I've seen people reenacting Gulf War, and that's obviously 1990s. So the 80s and 70s are fair game, provided you're doing it right, I think, really. As I say, provided you're doing it right. If you're just swanning around like an airsofter, maybe, with the kit kind of made up as you go along, then, if you're not putting the effort in to get it right, obviously there are a lot of veterans around who are going to perhaps look at your kit and say, oh, well, that's not right, and perhaps aren't going to see it as being very respectful if it's not being done right. That's the difference, I suppose. Whereas there's no one to perhaps directly critique you on, certainly for quite a bit earlier periods like the Great War and so forth. But that would be one thing I would say, is obviously bear that in mind, is to do it right if you're going to do it. But that's the same for any period of reenactment. So yeah, that's the advice I would give on that. It's not really any different from doing any other time, covering any other time period in terms of reenactment. Just do it right if you're going to do it, I think, is the answer to that. So yeah. Next question, please. Next question, please. Next question. This is just water, I promise.
What have I been putting in your drink? Will the World War II collector says
yes.
that his neighbour was in the RAF in the 50s. He gave him his headphones and oxygen mask.
Oh, wow, interesting.
From the bomber craft who flew in the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
The brand is called AirMed Limited. Have you heard of them? And if so, what do you know?
So who was that from, sorry?
Will the World War II collector.
Will the World War II collector was given some 1950s earphones, so possibly flying helmet, not sure, and oxygen mask. And they were made by whom, sorry?
AirMed Limited.
AirMed Limited. Now, I don't know about them off the top of my head, but 1 minute. Let's see what I have in here. This is the right box file. Is this the correct box file? Sorry about this, guys. Just 1 minute. Shuffle. It's not the right box file. It might be the next box file. Yeah, here we go. This should help us out. Flying helmets and accessories. So this might have an answer in it. This is from Helmets Limited, however. Now, you can tell me if... I'll hold this up for a minute so you can answer in your own time. If anything on there looks familiar to you, and we can perhaps talk about it in a little bit more detail. Obviously, that's the Mark II bone dome there, which is one I have an example of. But yeah, so different manufacturers, so they could well be different products. But we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail if you can give me an idea of what we're talking about. If not, then you can send me some information in an email, and I can have a look. I'd be interested to see anyway photographs if you could send those over on Facebook or in an email. But yes, so I'll see if we can get any information on that. And if you could provide any further information, we'll come back to that one in a minute. But next question, please. Jordan Bernardi.
When the anti-gas cape is attached to the belt.
Yes, when the anti-gas cape is attached to the belt, yes.
Is a ground sheet carried in the small pack, or was it discarded?
So is the ground sheet carried in the small pack, or was it discarded? Now, either you could have both. You could have no ground sheet and just using the gas cape, or you could have the ground sheets as well. It would depend on the unit, the time period, etc. Obviously, you have the example of Fusilier Payne, who's just carrying the gas cape, but it's folded under the flap of the haversack. But you could equally see someone who's not carrying, who's just carrying the gas cape and it's tied to the back of the belt. That was often done because it meant, very late war, of course, you see chaps who are fighting out of half tracks, doing a lot of street clearing and house clearing in Germany and the Low Countries, and they're often fighting without even the haversack. So in which case, best way of carrying your gas cape with you is to put it on the back of the belt. And of course, by that period, again, they're being used as waterproofs and as a lightweight ground sheet as well to a degree. So if you're in a position where you're going to be dumping the haversack, obviously it makes a lot of sense to have the gas cape tied to the back of the belt. But it really depends on period and unit orders, the orders that were around at the time as to what kit would be carried. So yeah, it varies is the answer to that. I can't give you a definitive because it changes, swaps and changes around. You'll sometimes see both carried, sometimes not. Next question, please.
Milo had asked, and I think this might have been answered by people in chat, why didn't you do an April Fool's joke like 14 Commando?
Oh, why didn't I do an April Fool's joke like 14 Commando? Well, I did the Land Rover one. I just wanted a change. I think you mean 13 Commando was the one I did previously because, of course, 14 Commando, 13 Commando doesn't exist. So that was the joke there, is obviously it's a unit which didn't exist. 14 Commando did exist, of course. But the reason I didn't do the same style was I didn't think it would be as amusing to do something that's, well, I just wanted to do a different type of joke, I guess. And I think I got quite a few people with it, which is the point of April Fools. And there's an appreciable number of downvotes on the video, which probably means I did the job. That's not the intention, obviously. I am joking, but I just did a different type of joke. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. Next question, please.
Oliver Burnhill again. If we take the classic movies of Almost Say or A Bridge Too Far, how accurate are the British uniforms in those movies?
Okay, so A Bridge Too Far, I'm more familiar with A Bridge Too Far than I am with The Longest Day, certainly in terms of the uniforms worn. Both of them are of their time in terms of uniforms. A Bridge Too Far actually does a pretty good job in general. There are obviously there's quite a lot of post-war smocks and things being worn by the airborne troops. And obviously there's issues with the vehicles and so forth that we used and various things. But on taken on balance, it's pretty good, really, for its time particularly. And I think that's partly due to the fact that obviously they had so many veterans advising on the kit and how things went and so forth. Excuse me, itchy nose. And I think that for its time, it has to be said it's very good. Longest Day, the kit is okay, but again, given the fact you're looking at quite specific operations, they didn't go out of their way to get authentic kit. But then again, at the time, you've got to think of the standards of Hollywood at the time in terms of the tanks they were using, the vehicles they were using. The kit was sort of held to the same standard of does it look vaguely correct? Does it have the basic look to it? And so forth, as opposed to is it spot on? Particularly when you're looking at individual characters, because obviously in these instances, particularly The Longest Day, they actually merge historical characters into perhaps they take elements of individuals and make one character out of them, and they try and give them the distinctive look to stick out in the film, as opposed to wearing strictly uniform, strictly items of uniform. So there's some concessions made there. They're certainly not something I'd suggest anyone goes and references to create, to recreate the troops of the time. Of the two, Bridge Too Far is better, gets closer to the mark. But yeah, it's a compromise. Film's always going to be a compromise in terms of getting kit absolutely spot on. But it's something I think in general Hollywood's got better with over the years. Their costuming departments have got better with. But the stuff in A Bridge Too Far particularly is not bad for the time period it was filmed, certainly. Next question, please.
Dylan Gash.
Dylan Gash asks.
First of all, he says hello.
Hello, Dylan.
Sorry if this has been asked before. Do you believe that the coronavirus crisis will have a long-term impact on reenacting once it's all over?
Do I believe the coronavirus crisis will have a long-term impact on reenacting when it's all over? I don't think so. I know events have been cancelled and so forth in the short term, but I don't think it'll have a very long-term impact. I think we'll try and get back to I think I'm keen to attend events. I think people will be keen to put them on again. So hopefully that will be the case, and we won't have they won't have a long-term impact. I certainly hope not anyway, but I don't think it will do. I can't see that. I can't see that being the case. I can't think of any reason why it would be anyway. I certainly hope not. You got me thinking now, but I can't think of any reason for why it would be a long-term, why there would be a long-term impact once things are back to normal, or as normal as they can be, as normal as they ever were. Anyway, next question, please.
Scots at War.
Scots at War asks.
Hi from all Scots at War Living History Society.
Hello to everyone at Scots at War Living History Society. Pass that on, please.
After portraying a soldier of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders for the ending video, have you considered doing any more Scottish?
So having portrayed a soldier of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders for the Aidan video, have I considered doing more Scottish kit? I have, yes. There is potential to look at again at the Argylls in Northern Ireland, which would be an interesting contrast to Aidan, because obviously it went from Aidan policing the end of empire, if you want to call it that, dealing with the Aidan emergency, to performing, I don't say similar duties because they weren't meant to be. The level of operation was not the same, but performing public order duties in Northern Ireland. So it's something I might look into doing. But yes, no, it's something that as and when it comes up and the opportunities there. Talking more about Scottish soldiers is something I would definitely like to do. The interesting thing, of course, is with these mannequins that I have, I can't really fit trousers to them because of the way they're constructed, but I can fit kilts. So that's something that might come up in the future. I can put kilts on them. So a kilted regiment may well be something that gets covered in the future. Obviously, at a time period when kilts were still being worn in the field, that may come up. But I don't have any immediate plans for more Scottish content or recognisably Scottish content. Of course, the thing is, by the time you get to a lot of the stuff I cover in the 60s through the 80s and 90s, a lot of stuff that would designate a Scottish regiment really has disappeared. And obviously infantry is fairly, in the field, infantry is fairly generic in terms of the uniform and so forth. So I suppose that's the issue with some of the stuff I cover in the Cold War. But going back, definitely, at some point there will probably be more Scottish content on the channel as well as all the other other stuff.
My great grandfathers, the Scottish one,
or
and the Liverpool one.
The Scottish. Yeah, Lucy's. You've asked. Just going very briefly off on a tangent about Scottish things. Lucy's great grandfathers. People have asked about my family history in the Great War. Lucy's Scottish or great grandfather in Scotland ended up in a Lowland regiment, a trousered regiment, so ended up wearing trousers and puttees during the Great War. And her great grandfather in Liverpool ended up in the Liverpool Scottish, so ended up in the Liverpool Scottish, the battalion of the Liverpool regiment, and in the King's Liverpool, and ended up wearing a kilt, despite the fact that he was in the King's Liverpool, but in the Liverpool Scottish. So, and he didn't like it very much. So, just an interesting little aside there and a slightly amusing one. But yes, next question, please.
Will you still be going to Irish ONUC 1960-64 Living History asks?
Oh, that's interesting. Irish in the Congo. Irish ONUC 1960-64. You will like some upcoming things, I think. I'd be interested. Yes. Anyway.
Will you still be going to Soviet Threat in September if it's on?
Will I still be going to Soviet Threat in September if it is on? Most definitely, yes. I think we're hoping to do a Korean War display. That's the plan anyway. But we'll see about that. I'm quite keen to do that. I think Lucy will probably be there as well if that's the case. But definitely planning on going. Sorry, just very quickly, I've just seen in the chat. Hello, James. How are you doing? Hello from Canada. Hope everything's and hello from the UK to Canada. I hope everything's going okay over there. So yes, that's the plan going forward. Is definitely to go to the Hat Green and do another event there. It's such a good event for doing Cold War, and people who go there obviously are expecting Cold War history, and they generally have a bit of an interest. Whereas if you go to a multi-period event, obviously most people are, there's more of a draw to different things to look at. You can Romans over there and English Civil War and Second World War. A Cold War focused event is a really nice thing to be able to go to because it is interesting and people are interested in that particular, those few decades and know what they're going to see and they, obviously have the focus on that. So definitely going to Hack Green in September if that's the case. Yeah, absolutely. Next question, please.
Milo asks, how accurate are Soldier of Fortune scrim scarves?
So Milo asks, how accurate are Soldier of Fortune scrim scarves? And I think you mean the camouflage face veil. They are very good from what I've seen compared to originals. The colour and so forth is very good indeed, and they're a good repro. I have one, and that's what I've used for doing airborne reenacting. Obviously, they weren't just issued to airborne troops, but they are a useful bit of kit from that point of view. And I have one. I don't know if you can hear the cat in the background squeaking. I don't think you could much in the previous stream, but I don't know whether the mic will pick it up or not. But yes, so yeah, they're a good repro. As I say, I don't have a downer on Soldier of Fortune as a company as a whole. Some of their products are fine, but yeah, that is one of the ones which they're fine. I have one myself. Next question, please.
Hamachi asks, I noticed in the previous video there are no good repro field service caps. Why is that? Is it the fabric and the cut is it because the fabric and cut is difficult to replicate?
So Tamachi asks if I've said previously there are no decent repro field service caps out there, and why is that? Because of the cut or the fabric? Well, the answer is the fabric. There are some repros out there which are a decent cut, but the gabardine material. If I grab one, just give me one moment. So I have a couple here. I have a couple of them here. This is wool gabardine. And if I have no idea if my webcam's up to this, bring it up close to the camera there, whether it'll focus. It's a very sort of fine weave with very little. It's not rough. It's quite smooth. It's not the same weave as Baratheon, but it's the same sort of texture under your hands. It's not the same weave at all, but it doesn't have the rough texture as serge, and that's the problem. Is that no one has been able to reproduce the wool gabardine in anything like a decent, to a decent degree. Most companies make them out of serge, which is incorrect, and they do look wrong. Because obviously, if you look how thin the fabric is there, where you've got the overlap there, where they fold over, you've got a double layer there, and there's nothing to it at all. It's very thin. The minute you try using serge, it looks very bulky. These tend to stick out at the side, which doesn't look right. So you end up with the shape looking wrong because the fabric's wrong. They may be made to the right cut, but because the fabric's wrong, they look wrong, and that's the problem. So until someone can reproduce the wool gabardine properly, you're not going to get the correct look. Let's see if I can you're not going to get the correct look. My hair tends to stick out the side when I try and wear an FS cap, but there we go. No, it's sticking out the side. I need to do this right. There we go. That's better. And then over to the side. There we go. Something like that. I haven't got a mirror to check it in and be a tart, but there we go. FS cap. How many different hats can Simon wear in one live stream?
A lot.
Yeah, I have quite a lot of hats. I do have a lot of hats here. But yes, so that's the problem with the FS cap reproductions, generally speaking. The fabric is wrong, and that creates the wrong shape on the head. But yes, so next question, please.
The next question is, sorry, they've been putting loads of questions in whilst I've been doing
Oh dear.
We
might have to have a cut-off point at some point because we've got a big long list. I do like to talk. I'll say probably we'll have the cut-off point at 9 o'clock and see where we're up to by then, and then at least I've got half an hour to get through the answers. John Pinero asks,
would the topic of US Air Force security forces / police utilizing DPM at RAF bases be of interest?
Would the use by US Air Force security police of British DPM at US Air Force bases be of interest? It is of interest, yes. Possibly not for videos for myself, but it is an interesting thing that they ended up using DPM combat uniform.
He's seen some photos of personnel wearing M69 flat vests.
Yeah.
Alice equipment.
Yes, but British combat uniform. It's an interesting topic, yeah. It's not something I think I'd necessarily cover in any detail on the channel. It's a little bit outside my actual scope. I like comparing kit and so forth, but it's interesting that they made US Air Force Security Police kit in and of itself is quite interesting. From the keep safe stuff they used in the sort of the in Vietnam, obviously the US Air Force Security Police developed units specifically for air-based defence as opposed to just security police duties, which is very interesting. I have an interest in the kit they used. They obviously had some of their own kit, as well as then using more USGI stuff like the Alice equipment and so forth. It's interesting in and of itself as a whole, and the use of British kit is of course very interesting. But I don't think it's necessarily something I would cover on the channel myself. It is a little bit outside the scope of.
Just a response to a previous question.
Response to a previous
Matthew
question.
Matthew White has said that there is a book published last year through Hellion called Those Bloody Kilts.
Oh, really?
By a friend of his, looking at the Highland soldier in the Great War, if he wanted to explore it a bit more.
Definitely.
And
yes.
If you would like to borrow Gordon's kilt for a video, he can sort it out.
Oh, well, that's very kind. Thank you. So that's an offer to borrow a Gordon's kilt and a mention of what was the book called again? Sorry? Those Bloody Kilts. I will definitely, that's a response to the previous question, I think, talking about Scottish, more Scottish content for the channel. I will certainly bear that in mind. Thank you very much for the offer. And I'll have to have a look at the book because, yeah, that sounds good. Just from the title, that sounds good. So, yes, have a look at that going forward, definitely. Next question, please.
John Shanahan, for someone getting into or getting back into reenacting, do you have any tips or advice?
So John Shanahan, getting back into reenacting or getting into reenacting. Get the basic stuff together first. I mean, it depends what kit you have, obviously, but get the basics together first. So if you're doing British reenacting, Second World War, get a decent set of early war battle dress, decent set of web equipment together before you start getting any specialist stuff like an airborne smock, a Denison smock or anything like that. Try and get the basics together first would be my advice. Decent pair of ammo boots, for example. That would be my advice. Would be start with the basics and work from there. I think a lot of people make the mistake when they jump in is I'm going to do this, and so they go and buy all the specialist stuff for the area they want to do. Whereas a lot of infantry, it's very very generic, and a lot of the basic stuff you need anyway. You could really do. I mean, obviously, a lot of people do get away with just wearing battle dress trousers, a t-shirt, and a Denison smock. Denison covers a lot of sins, but having a battle dress is in the first place is preferable, really. So that would be my advice: get the basics together first before you start buying other bits and pieces. Next question, please. Jan Dobbelstein, yes.
What do you think will happen with reenactment in the upcoming years? Do you think the quality of reenactors will get worse?
What do I think? So the question is, what do I think will happen with reenacting in the coming years? Do I think the quality of reenactors will get worse? I don't. I think more people are doing reenacting, so I think that's a little bit difficult to say. I think that there is a core of reenactors who will remain very good. Who, obviously, I think there's the potential there for reenactors to get a lot better because there's a lot more knowledge about the kit, and the standard of reenacting has gone up in some groups, but there's more groups doing it, and some of those groups do it very badly. So if it continues to proliferate, you're always going to get people who dive in without doing the research who are not necessarily going to do it very well. So I think the dichotomy will remain of decent and or well, not even a dichotomy. The gradient of different grades of reenactor will remain, and perhaps it will get bigger. It certainly seems to be an expanding hobby, and I think that's led to the market for quite a lot of decent repro kit, which in theory should mean people are doing it right. But obviously, some people will inevitably still jump in and do it without the prior research, and that's the problem. So I don't know is the answer, but in my opinion, I think you'll continue to see the mix of different people. So yeah.
And Irish ONUC said he has an M45
Gustav, yes, it's Carl Gustav submachine gun, I believe that would be.
And he takes it. You'll be doing Britain career.
Britain career, yes, that's the plan. But I look so Air Show and UC 1960-64, bringing the M45 Gustav. That'll be fantastic to have a look at. Thank you. And yes, I will be doing British. We'll be recreating the British Army, representing the British Army in Korea, most likely wearing combat uniform. I think we're doing late war career. I think that was the plan we talked about. If not, we might be doing. It depends on the weather and stuff, but we might be doing our jungle warfare display that we plan to do at the start of the year. But I think we will probably stick with doing career. We shall see. But yes.
An odd question next that I'm not sure if it's a language barrier. Do him chaos.
Who's this from? Do him chaos.
Asks, how did you get introduced to hunting?
How did I get introduced to hunting? I don't hunt. I've been shooting, but that's all on ranges. I've not done hunting. So as you say, that might be a language barrier. I'm not sure. It might be a translation error or something. But yeah, I can't answer that one because I don't hunt, I'm afraid. Next question, please. Many Jan Doublestein again.
What is your opinion on Pegasus Militaria?
What is my opinion of Pegasus Militaria? As far as I'm aware, I've not bought anything from Pegasus myself, but as far as I'm aware, they're very, very good. I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how much in terms of the airborne kit and stuff. I'm not sure how much is in production at the moment. But as far as I'm aware, their kit's very good. But as I say, that's from sort of speaking to others. I don't actually have any Pegasus gear myself, so that's based on talking to other people about it. Yeah, that's the sort of limited answer I can give on that one. Next question, please.
The next one is Sander asks, will you ever do a Suez Crisis mannequin?
So Sanders asks, will I ever do put together a Suez Crisis mannequin? Very probably, yeah. Suez is on my list to cover at some point. Definitely, it will come up at some point, but I can't say when. Unfortunately, I can't put a date on that. But yes, it will come up. Don't worry, that will be covered at some point. Next question, please.
David Brennan.
Yes.
Have you scrubbed this year as a reenacting campaign year yet?
Have I scrubbed this? David Brennan asks, have I scrubbed this year as a reenacting year yet? Not yet. No, I don't think we'll be on lockdown through the whole summer, and there's stuff in the autumn. So no, I as soon as events are reconfirmed or
as soon as you get your grandparents back garden.
As soon as I can get your grandparents back garden, they'll be, well, that's not reenacting events, but as soon as events are posted as back on, we'll be there. So no, I've not scrubbed the year. I don't think that'll be the case. I could well be wrong. This could be, this could all extend for a while. But yeah, no, I've not scrubbed the year myself in my mind. I'm still hoping stuff goes on. So yeah. Next question, please.
Sander again, and it's not got an S.
So Sander again.
How often was the light respirator bag worn attached horizontally on the belt, or is this a reenactorism?
So how often was the light anti-gas respirator haversack carried horizontally on the back of the belt? You do see it done. Airborne troops did it a fair bit. You do see that in photographs. It was done post-war as well. I've seen it done with both 1944 and 58 pattern equipment. But it's not universal by any means. A lot of bog standard infantry seem to have just carried it on the shoulder strap. Obviously, that does mean that when you take your web equipment off, you still have your respirator with you, which is perhaps important depending on the threat that's perceived. But no, it was done. It just depends, I'd say, if, like with anything, if you're recreating a unit, try and look at what the majority of the men in that unit did in photographs and copy that. If you can see the shoulder strap over the shoulder, carry it on the shoulder strap. If they seem to carry it on the belt, carry it on the belt. That would be my advice. But it's not purely a reenactorism. I think probably more people do it maybe reenacting than was the case in the field, in real life, historically speaking. But it was done. That's what the Seahawks are there for. So yeah. Next question, please. Historic A asks,
what was the need for two sizes of pack?
What was the need for two sizes of pack? Well, one is a pack, one is a haversack. That's one thing to say with that. And of course, this is something which existed from between both the 1908 and, well, it goes back further than that, of course. The haversack originally was carried, if you look at earlier equipment, was carried on the hip on a shoulder strap separate to the rest of the equipment. It could be carried on the belt in some instances, a bit more like a bread bag in that regard, going back. And it was quite literally just for carrying rations originally, and that's how it was intended with the 1908 equipment. So your pack carried your greatcoat, your holdall, your housewife, your hussif rather, all that stuff. Yeah, I know, saying it long ways rather than the correct shortened way. Hussif, and your haversack would carry rations. Of course, battle order was introduced during, and it's interesting. Battle order was introduced during the Great War. There were carrying a haversack on the back pre-existed to some degree in other campaigns during the Victorian era, but that's a topic beyond sort of question really. The haversack was moved to the back during the Great War in battle order and was used to carry a lot more stuff. The 1908 pattern haversack is not really designed for it, it's quite small. So it's the intention of the two packs originally, or the pack and the haversack rather, is to carry your greatcoat, your subsistence load in terms of clothing, your wash kit, and everything else in the holdall, and stuff to repair your uniform, your hussif, and then rations down in the haversack on your hip in full marching order. That's then carried over to the 1937 pattern. But in the 1937 pattern, you have a haversack which is primarily intended to be worn on the back, can be worn on the brace ends. So the haversack's enlarged so that you can carry subsistence load, including cardigan, cap comforter, that sort of thing, with you in a small little load on your back. The pack continues to carry the greatcoat and so forth, and will be used for changing stations and out of march for that. Not really designed to be carried in the field all that much. So it's an evolution. The haversack goes from something really just intended to carry rations to something that can carry the limited stuff you're going to need in the field in a more convenient little package. And that obviously is kind of spurred on by the use of battle order during the Great War. Although, as I say, in Victorian campaigns, you occasionally see the haversack rigged up to be carried on the back. The Boer War, you see the haversack sometimes carried on the back. They're rigged in a way using the shoulder strap to carry it like a rucksack on the back. So that's the reason for the two different haversacks and the historical sort of change in that use. It evolved. The haversack evolved to carry more, and that's why you have the pair. And it's so you can carry all your kit with you when you're changing stations, in addition to obviously having your kit bag as well for various other items. But yes, that's the sort of the broad answer to that question. Next question, please.
Zach asks, have you been down to North Wales before? I recommend you check out the Homefront Museum at Llandudno and go for a walk to see the World War II defences at the Ogwen Valley, Snowdonia.
Oh, right, okay. So Zach Pack suggests a visit to North Wales to look at the Homefront Museum at Llandudno and the defences at where? Ogwen Valley in Snowdonia. So I love North Wales. I've not been frequently, but I'm my other hobby is narrow gauge railways, so I have an affinity for Wales in general, really, because of that. But no, I'll have to, if we're over that way again. It's not a million miles from us. I'll have to go and have a look. Definitely. Thank you for the recommendations on both of those. Yeah, I'll bear that in mind. Next question, please, or next comment, I guess. Not just questions. Comments are welcome as well.
UK asks, is the ointment, anti-gas and cotton waste carried in the anti-gas kit separate to those carried in the respirator haversack, or are they moved from haversack into the gas cape?
So that's a good question, actually. Off the top of my head. Sorry, British World War II reenactor?
It's WWII UK.
So World War II UK. Sorry, yes, World War II UK asks, was the anti-gas ointment and cotton waste carried in the pocket of the gas cape, separate to that, issued in the haversack? And my first reaction is, I think it was moved across. The idea was you'd move it across to the gas cape to stop it being contaminated. But I'm not absolutely certain on that. Obviously, the gas cape, you can't really carry it rolled with the ointment and so forth in there. So I don't think so. But I will double check on that. But no, I believe it's the same stuff as you're issued in the haversack. It's to go in the pocket of the gas cape, the anti-gas cape rather. So yeah, that's that one. Next question, please.
Harry B says, hi, do you know any groups that display as BEF at public events around the Cambridgeshire region? Thanks.
Harry B asks if I know of any groups displaying as the BEF around the Cambridgeshire region, and I'm afraid I don't, Harry. I'm afraid I'm based up north, So I don't know off the top of my head any groups around Cambridge, let alone those that recreate the BEF. I'm sorry, I can't advise on that. I do apologise. Not off the top of my head anyway. The only thing I would be doing would be the same thing you could do in using Google. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. Next question, please.
John Shanahan asks.
John Shanahan asks.
Are your Navy uniforms, are they original or repro?
My Navy uniforms, are they original or repro? Most are original, up to and including some Great War stuff, but the Victorian stuff is reproduction. None of that is original. But the stuff I wear for Second War reenacting is all original. Some of it is some of it is definitely 50s made, but some of it is wartime made. But yeah, that's all original stuff. None of it is reproduction. The stuff earlier than that is some of it reproduction, some of it original. So it's a mixed match when it gets to the Great War, but Second War stuff is all original. So yes. Next question, please.
David Brennan
asks.
How do you rate the Mark 7 British rain cape when it's raining at gigs?
So how do I rate the Mark 7 British rain cape at events? It's okay. I mean, it's not great. it's not perfect. I prefer a monsoon cape personally, but it does its job to a degree. It does keep the worst of the rain off, but they were never a particularly good item. But you can wear them as a cape, and they kind of serve that purpose. So yeah, they're not perfect by any means, but they do keep the worst off. But yeah, no, it's an improvisation really. It's sort of a slightly better step up from an improvisation using a regular ground sheet. It's not a brilliant design by any means. Next question, please.
Dylan Gash asks, you wouldn't happen to have any recommended vendors for mannequins?
Dylan Gash asks, do I have any recommended vendors for mannequins to display some of his kit? So mannequins, the ones I bought are relatively cheap. They're 30 quid base and top, polystyrene ones from eBay. The reason I bought them is they're lightweight. They're not really suited for putting heavy lots of webbing on. They're not great from that point of view. But they were, as I say, they're just under 30 quid each delivered. So cheap and cheerful, really. Yeah, I would recommend something more heavy duty if you're looking for sort of something that you're not looking to cart around. One of the reasons I wanted light ones was to be able to easily put them in the car, carry them around, because I'm on a first floor flat. So yeah, it's that's where I got mine from though. So that's sort of the answer to the question there is that's where I got mine from is from eBay, and they are just cheap, well, relatively cheap polystyrene examples. But yeah, that's an answer to that one, I think. Next question, please.
Syntax1501
asks,
do you know what the KSLI would have been wearing and what kit they were using around 1961 in Germany?
So he asks about the KSLI in Germany in 1960. The KSLI in 1960 would still, it's still in that sort of that time period where you're being issued out a combat kit. It's difficult to say for an individual unit because it would depend on what they were doing. You're still in the time period before 1960 pattern has been introduced as a standard combat uniform, and I believe at that time you're still seeing, to a degree at least, combat uniform being issued for use in the field and battle dress being used elsewhere. So you'd still have 1949 pattern battle dress, definitely. You haven't seen number 2 uniform come in, for example, yet. So the number 2 uniform would still be smartened up battle dress. But you would see in the field they'd be using combat uniform, certainly on exercise and so forth, the Korean War era combat uniform, with probably 1937 pattern still at that time, possibly 1958, but it seems to have been, without seeing photographs and looking specifically, it's difficult to say because there doesn't seem to have been a particular rhyme or reason about who and what got 1958 pattern when. Generally, I believe it was supposed to be infantry first, and obviously British Army the Rhine first. But there's still photographs of BAOR infantry using 1937 pattern into the early 60s, so it could well have still been 1937 pattern. As with all these things, try and dig up original photographs would be my advice. But yeah, that's roughly what you'd be looking at in terms of kit at that time period. Yeah. Next question, please.
TSK Medical Limited asks, I think generally to chat, but do you know where they can get a genuine World War II British toothbrush and socks.
Oh, okay. So TSK Medical Limited asks where they can get an original period toothbrush, British toothbrush, and socks. Both of those I have seen turn up on occasion at shows. Obviously, that's not very helpful at the moment, but they do turn up on trade stands at shows occasionally. Otherwise, they do show up on eBay on occasion as well. So, unfortunately, it's the same old answer when everyone, I'm afraid it really is, when anyone asks where they can find such and such and such. It's generally speaking a case of at shows and occasionally on eBay. That's where these things show up. So, yeah, that's the only answer I can give, really. Next question, please.
Homie Squad 101.
Homie Squad 101 asks,
do you do World War I German reenacting?
Do I do German World War I reenacting? No, I don't. Simple answer to that one, no, I don't. I'm interested in the kit. I'm interested in the uniform for the time period, if only to contrast it with that which has been worn by the other countries involved. But no, I don't. I don't plan on reenacting it. I may get some repro kit together at some point to compare the British kit, but it's not something I reenact. I don't think I ever will do. I can't see myself really reenacting German of any time period, but it's interesting to display the kit. So yeah, that's an answer to that one.
That's actually where I cut off.
That's where we've cut off the questions.
So a couple of people have posted a couple of questions after.
Yeah, sure. We'll take a couple more, and then I'll probably call the stream for this evening.
Home Squad 101. Do you have World War II British wire
cutters? World War II British wire.
World War II
British wire cutters. I don't actually. No, that's one thing I don't have in the collection. I have a set of US wire cutters, but that was from the Korean War. They were very cheap in the pouch, and I got those primarily for use 41 Commando kit from Korea. Of course, they were equipped with US kit. I don't have Second War British wire cutters. No, I don't. I don't have Great War either. Friend David does, but I don't. And the next question.
Will the World War II collector?
Will the World War II collector asks.
Have you been to Spurn Point in East Yorkshire? They have defensive machine gun bunkers in case the Germans invaded.
Have I been to Spurn Point? Spurn Head, I think. I have briefly. I went en route to Europe. Went on a geology trip with school, actually, of all things. And we went to Spurn Head because it's a very interesting coastal feature. It was a geography trip, actually. Sorry, it was a geography trip, that one. But it's an interesting coastal feature. And yes, I saw the defensive bunkers. In fact, there was one which had due to erosion, had actually fallen in and crashed down onto the beach. But no, it's interesting defensive works there, definitely. Yes. And do we have any more?
Zach just did this Snowdonian thing, said he'll send you an email if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. No, that I'd definitely be interested to see, even if I don't get a chance to get. So Zach Pack offers photographs of the defensive works in Wales, in the Valley, in Snowdonia. I'd definitely be interested to see that. I even if I don't get there, it would be interesting to see. So yeah, if you could send some photographs over, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Syntax has also said, thanks for the answer. My grandpa was a company signaller with them in his national service days.
Oh, right, I see. Okay, the KSLI, yes, yeah.
And he also asked, have you ever thought of doing a mannequin displaying the buffs in Aden?
I certainly could do, yes. I mean, a lot of the basic kit is very so. What was the name again? Sorry, Syntax 1501. Interesting to hear about your grandfather in the KSLI. Regarding the buffs in Aden, that's certainly something. I forget which specific units were out there and when. So that would affect obviously the kit worn, but it's something I could look into doing. Certainly, yes. I mean, a lot of the kit's very standard, but certainly I'll have a look at that. Yeah. So yeah, are there any other questions come up in the chat?
One more.
This will be the last question, guys, and then I'll call the stream for this evening. I hope everyone's enjoyed. But yes, next question. The last question.
Asks, which army in exile in Britain during World War II is the coolest?
Okay, Tamachi, I know you want me to say Norwegian. I can see that there, but I'm not going to say Norwegian. I'm going to say Polish. And that is purely because I like the insignia and so forth. That's not based on anything other than that. It's a very shallow reasoning. And I include their naval forces in that as well. So yeah, that would be my thing. So the buffs were there in 1958. Thank you for that, Syntax 1501. So that would be more of the Radfan campaign, the previous, the fighting as opposed to fighting Flossie and the other independence movements in the towns and the cities of Aden itself. That's, I believe, the 50s. You see more of the Radfan campaign up country, dealing with the rebellious tribes up there. I have done a recent video looking at that, but it's certainly something I'll look at going forward, definitely. But yes, thank you very much for that, Zach Pack, as well. I see you're going to send an email. That's brilliant. Yeah, I think they certainly did too much. The Poles definitely fought like hell. That's certainly true. But yes, I will. Very sad story in itself, obviously, what happened with Poland and everything in the Second World War. But that's a topic perhaps for a video all in itself, maybe, or something to come up in another stream, maybe. But I do hope you've all found that interesting, guys, and happy Easter, everyone. And obviously there'll be another stream coming up at some point in the future, I think. So hope you've all enjoyed, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.